let's move on now to our final wide receiver in our top four, and that is Zay Flowers from Boston College. This was a guy who I had heard of about this time last year because he was rumored to be leaving BC and coming into the draft, but then decided to stay for one more year. And man, his highlights are electric. He is stop, start, 100 miles an hour to 0, 0 to 100. It's actually really impressive to watch, and I think it really shows the value of not just being able to accelerate quickly, but then also stop on a dime. And Zay Flowers' game embodies that, in my opinion.
Yeah. It's unfortunate he was on Boston College, who went 3-9 this year. So because it would have been fun to see him go up against much more meaningful competition, so to say. But you're right. The thing for me of the four receivers that we talked about, he is the fastest 40, 4.42. But then at the same time, he is also the smallest as well. Let me pull this up. 5'9". He's 182 pounds, so he's got about 10 pounds on Jordan Addison. But the shortest arms are 29 29 and 1/4 inches, and then 9 and 1/4 inch hands. So he is the one of all the receivers that we've talked about. He is a true slot receiver. JSN, maybe you can make an argument that you can move him around. I don't see him being really anything else outside of a slot receiver here, but I think he's going to be the best pure slot receiver in this draft class, just because of how quick he is and the consistency of that, with his pretty consistent production during his time at Boston College, when there was no talent at all during his really outside of him.
Yeah. No, and that to me, I think is what's impressive is he was able to do all of this with very, very little talent. BC has been bad for, I want to say, since Matt Ryan was there.
I think they might have still been bad when he was there.
I mean, it's possible. And with him, I think you just see on tape what he can do with the ball in his hands. And it does remind you a lot of like a Jalen Waddle, in my opinion, of just get the ball in his hands and let him go create. He's just so electric with the ball in his hands. One of the things with him that is concerning, he does have a 10.3% drop rate, which is pretty well below average. You want to see guys really have less than 8. A little over 8 is okay, but once when they start encroaching on that 10%, that's pretty bad.
Yeah.
That's a concern. He has the highest drop rate of any of the receivers that we've talked about today. Again, some of that I think could be contributed to bad quarterback play, just not making him have to reach for more than what he should. They usually factor some of that into drop percentage, but it can play a role. He is he's a home run hitter waiting to happen. And to me, like when you watch him on tape, that's all I can see is he can take a slant 65 yards with ease. And to me, that's what separates him from everybody else that we've talked about.
Well, and he would fit a system to me that the one that pops out is Dallas, because you already have CeeDee Lamb, you already have your number one receiver out there. Kind of have a rotational of number 2 receivers with like Michael Gallup or like Noah Brown or who was the other guy they drafted? Jalen Tolbert, but I don't think he saw too much playing time last year.
No, he missed over.
But him in this year. Yeah, him in the slot in an offense like that, with how much attention CeeDee Lamb brings, where if they can find a way to utilize his speed, so much attention is going to the number one receiver where he would be absolutely explosive, just like what you're talking about, where he can take a slant 65 yards to the house. And so that is the type of game-changing ability that he brings to the table, just with his quickness and his speed. The issue for me, though, when looking at him long-term and when you see a team that taking him there, is then you have guys that are later behind him that like Jalen Hyatt, Josh Downs. Do I really want to take him in the first round? You have other guys, Tyler Scott from Cincinnati, who was a similar type receiver. Let me confirm this. 5'10", 177 pounds. I mean, a slot receiver in the NFL who ran 40-yard dash. I think was just 0.02 of a second slower than him. So one of the issues for me when I see him going first overall is a team really going to use a first round pick on him when maybe if we wait a little bit, we can get a Zay Flowers light who can do the exact same things, and maybe we can kind of grow him up. And so that's when my issue when saying Zay Flowers is the number one. It is just it's nothing against him on his skill ability. It's just that there's so many of him.
Well, to be fair, there's so many of everybody, I think, except Quentin Johnson in this draft. I think even you look at Jackson Smith and Jigba, it's like, okay, well, you got Parker Washington from Penn State, who is 5'10 and a half, 212 pounds. And then you have Keyshawn Boutte from LSU, who actually coming out of high school was the top wide receiver in the class. And I think you look at Jordan Addison, and he to me almost kind of falls into a more polished Zay Flowers category. And him and Josh Downs are very similar. Josh Downs is like kind of the bridge between Zay Flowers and Jordan Addison. So everybody except Quentin Johnson in this class has.
I mean, I can see what you're saying. The only thing, I mean, I was looking at it now. Not saying that they're nearly as good as Quentin Johnson, but just his comparisons in this draft. I would put Cedric Tillman up there, A.T. Perry. Also, Xavier Hutchinson is an inch smaller, but similar height, same
Xavier
weight.
Hutchinson plays a very different game, though. He's a big slot. Yeah. Xavier Hutchinson actually plays a lot like Jacoby Myers. So, I don't know. We've gotten way off topic from Zay Flowers.
I do see your point about Quentin Johnson, but with Zay Flowers, I think he'll be the first pure slot receiver taken off the board. Will it be the first receiver overall? I don't know. I think the other receivers would have to fall a lot before. It's more likely that all their other receivers fall a lot more than Zay Flowers goes up the board and someone takes him.
I think Zay Flowers is kind of cemented in the mid to late 20s. That 25 to 30 range, I think, is his sweet spot. Mm-hmm. And I think he will most likely be the last one of the four that we've talked about today off the board. However, I could see teams liking his skill set, teams with already have a true X receiver. I could actually see teams liking his skill set more than Quentin Johnson's. Mm-hmm. And actually, maybe Jackson Smith and Jigba if they're looking for like a true home run hitter. However, JSN he's just so polished. I think Jordan Addison is everything that Zay Flowers does, but a little better.
Yeah. And a little bit taller.
Yeah. And so for me, I really like Zay Flowers as a prospect. I think he's kind of in that weird range where he's an elite athlete. He can definitely play at the NFL level, but he's not the generational receiver that I don't think anybody in this draft is, but he's not close to that. He's not close to a Jalen Waddle coming out of college or like a Devontae Smith.